Uncle sent me a video of my sister laughing about how she played me for a fool, while I'd been letting her stay in my house rent-free for years. She's too dumb to ever kick me out, she said. I didn't say anything and acted normally until next month came. Uncle Ray sent me a video that completely upended my world. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted and ready for my usual quiet evening, when my phone buzzed. Uncle Ray's message was unusual. He rarely sent random texts, especially not with a note saying, "You need to see this, ally." I'm sorry. Curious yet uneasy, I clicked on the video. In that instant, everything shifted. There was Amber, my sister, lounging in our parents' backyard during one of their weekend barbecues. With a drink in hand and a smug grin, she was clearly having a field day. Rolling her eyes dramatically, she laughed. Ally's too dumb to ever kick me out. She just lets me live here rent-free like an idiot. Her words were punctuated by chuckles from cousin Matt, friend Lindsay, and even Dad. In that moment, every laugh felt like a dagger. I replayed the clip over and over, each viewing slicing through me. Too dumb to ever kick me out, an idiot wasting my money. For 3 years, Amber had been living in my house. When she first moved in, after a rough breakup and losing her apartment, she had tearfully promised, "I just need a little time, ally. I swear I'll get back on my feet soon." Trusting her, I opened my home to her. No rent, no extra bills, thinking it was just temporary help. And now here she was laughing at my generosity. I felt a strange, eerie calm instead of raging. Uncle Ray's message popped up again. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old me, always ready to give her the benefit of the doubt, wanted to ask for an explanation. But the new me, the one slapped in the face by this betrayal, typed back, "Thank you. Don't say anything to her. I'll handle it." And I intended to. I didn't confront Amber head-on that night. I didn't storm into her room or demand an explanation. Instead, the next morning at breakfast, I greeted her with my usual smile, asked about her work, and laughed at her stories, exactly as if nothing had changed. But I had made plans all through the night. When next month rolled around, when the rent that she'd never been asked to pay was due, everything would shift. That morning, as I calmly stirred my coffee in the kitchen, Amber breezed in, completely unaware that I knew the truth. "Morning," she said with a dramatic stretch. "Damn, I slept like a baby last night. That guest bed of yours is way too comfortable." I smiled politely. She had no idea I'd spent the night planning this change. As usual, Amber wandered around the kitchen like she owned the place, grabbing the last of my oat milk, pouring herself a cup, humming to herself. For 3 years, I had allowed her to take without question, without a hint of gratitude. She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples, and complained, "Work is insane right now. I swear if my boss emails me one more time about those reports, I might lose it." I nodded along, though my mind kept echoing her earlier words. She claimed, "I make way more than you even know." Amber had a good job and a stable income. She could move out any time, yet she pretended to struggle while milking my generosity. I sipped my coffee slowly and then asked casually, "So, what are your plans this month?" Amber frowned. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "You've been here for a while now. I figured maybe you're thinking of your next steps. Maybe looking for a new place." She groaned dramatically. "Oh, ally, I've got so much on my plate right now. Moving is the last thing I need to deal with, plus it's so expensive." I fought back a laugh. Clearly she could afford it. Keeping my tone neutral, I added, "I was actually thinking it might be time for some changes around here." Barely glancing up from her phone, she asked, "What kind of changes?" I let silence stretch until a tense pause filled the air, then said casually, "Well, starting next month, I think you should start paying rent." For a split second, Amber froze. Then she let out a breathy laugh. "Wait, are you serious?" I tilted my head. "Yeah, I mean, you've been here for 3 years, Amber." She scoffed. "Come on, ally, we're family. You really expect me to pay rent?" I held my coffee cup near my lips and simply replied, "Yes." The word hit her like a slap. Amber leaned back, a mix of amusement and disbelief on her face. "Wow, I just wasn't expecting you to pull something like this. I mean, you let me stay out of kindness, out of love, and now you're treating me like a tenant." I forced a light chuckle. "It's not a big deal, just basic rent. I'm thinking maybe $1,200 a month would be fair." Her jaw dropped. $1,200? That's insane." I raised an eyebrow. "Not really. It's actually below market rate. You're getting a steal." She shook her head and set down her coffee with a sharp clink. "Are you seriously doing this to me after everything?" I almost asked what she thought she'd done for me, but instead I just smiled, stood up, and headed to the sink with my coffee cup. "Just giving you a heads up, so you have time to sort out your finances." Amber stared at me, mouth agape. She looked ready to argue but said nothing. I knew then she expected me to cave, to feel guilty, to back down. But she had no idea the real storm was coming. For the next few days, Amber avoided me. Normally, she was all over the house, lounging on the couch, blasting Netflix late into the night, leaving dishes behind as if I were her personal maid. But after our rent conversation, she kept her distance. When we did cross paths, her answers were short. and I could feel the simmering anger radiating from her. She wasn't used to being told no. I had been too accommodating for too long, and with this one small change she was already beginning to crack. I wanted her to feel that discomfort, to realize she wasn't in control anymore. Finally, on Friday night, Amber confronted me. I was curled up with the book in the living room when she stormed in. No small talk, just raw, unfiltered irritation. Crossing her arms, she demanded, "Are you really serious about this rent thing?" I looked up unfazed and replied, "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" She paced, scoffing. "I just don't get why you're doing this now. After 3 years, it makes no sense." I set my book aside and met her gaze steadily. "Because it's time, Amber. You have a good job, you earn well. There's no reason you shouldn't contribute." Her frustration flared. "We're family, ally. Family helps each other out. You're really going to treat me like some random tenant?" I didn't flinch. "You're living here like a tenant. Why shouldn't you pay like one?" Her nostrils flared as she searched for a way to twist my words. Then she switched tactics, sighing dramatically and softening her tone. "Look, I know I joke around a lot and maybe I don't show it much, but I appreciate you. I've been dealing with a lot, work stress, personal stuff. I don't want to burden you." I let that hang for a moment and then asked, "So you have the money then?" She blinked, then replied, "What? I mean, it's life stress, not financial. So paying rent shouldn't be an issue, right?" Her face twitched before she quickly masked it. "Technically, yeah, I could pay," she admitted dismissively, then added, "But why should I? You don't even need the money, ally." A slow, amused smile crept across my face. "It's not about my need, it's about fairness." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, fairness? Are you serious right now?" I replied simply, "Yes." Amber let out a bitter laugh. "Wow, you've really changed." I kept my tone light. Maybe I've just opened my eyes." I caught a fleeting look of panic in her expression. She still thought she was in control, but something had shifted, and she didn't like it. Shaking her head, she said, "Well, I'm not paying rent, so you'll have to figure something out." I held her gaze and let silence fill the room, letting her think she'd won. Then I smiled. "Okay." That was it, just okay. I watched as uncertainty replaced her confident smirk. She expected me to argue, to plead, even negotiate, but I said nothing more. Next month was coming, and she had no idea what was waiting. When the first of the month arrived, my morning passed quietly. Amber, however, burst into the kitchen as usual, stomping in, acting carefree. She poured herself coffee, grabbed one of my expensive protein bars, one of many luxuries she never replaced, and flopped onto the couch, scrolling on her phone like always. She seemed relaxed and smug, convinced I'd backed down, that my rent demand was just a fleeting moment of frustration. She thought she'd won. Then exactly at 9 a.m. her phone buzzed. I watched from across the room as she frowned, tapped a few times, and then sat up straighter. "What the hell?" she muttered. Turning her phone toward me with raised eyebrows, she demanded, "Ally, I just got an email from your rental management company." "What the?" I set my coffee down calmly. "Oh right, that's your lease agreement." Her mouth dropped open, and in that moment, the new reality had fully set in. I couldn't believe it when I heard my phone buzz with Uncle Ray's message. "You need to see this, Ally. I'm sorry. I'd just gotten home from work, exhausted and ready to settle into my usual quiet evening. But when I clicked on the video, my whole world shifted. There she was, my sister Amber, lounging in our parents' backyard during one of their weekend barbecues. With a drink in hand and a smug grin on her face, she rolled her eyes and laughed. "Ally's too dumb to ever kick me out. She just lets me live here rent-free like an idiot." Her words were backed by laughing relatives, and even Dad chimed in. Each replay of that video cut deeper. Too dumb to ever kick me out, an idiot wasting my money. For 3 years, Amber had been living in my house. When she first moved in, she told me tearfully that she just needed a little time after a rough breakup and losing her apartment. I never thought twice. I opened my home, covering rent and bills, thinking it was temporary help. Now here she was mocking my kindness behind my back. I felt an eerie calm instead of the rage I expected. Uncle Ray's message popped up again, and after a moment's hesitation I replied, "Thank you. Don't say anything to her. I'll handle it." And I meant it. That very next morning, I greeted Amber as usual. I smiled, asked about her day, and even laughed at her jokes, all while silently planning my next move. When next month's rent was due, the very rent she'd never ever been asked to pay, I decided it was time to formalize things. I sent her an email that, in effect, was her rental contract with the property management company I'd hired. "Your lease agreement," I said matter-of-factly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Since you said you weren't paying rent, this email is your official rental contract." Amber blinked, then scrolled through the email frantically. "This says my first rent payment is due today?" "That's right." I nodded. I'd made it official. Her face went from shock to bitter laughter. "Oh my God, you're insane," she snapped, her tone a mix of disbelief and outrage. "No, Amber," I said firmly. "I'm just done being taken advantage of." I could see the cracks in her confidence, the frantic search for a way out of this situation. For a split second, she switched to victim mode. Ally, come on, you're my sister. I thought we were supposed to support each other. We are, I replied coolly. And for 3 years I supported you, without ever asking for anything in return. She hesitated, her eyes pleading for an explanation. You never gave me a warning. I let out a small laugh. I gave you a full month's notice. That's more than fair. Amber's face twisted with anger. I don't have the money for this right now, she protested. I tilted my head. That's interesting, because last week I heard you on the phone bragging about buying VIP tickets to that music festival next month. Her mouth snapped shut. Gotcha, you have the money. You just don't want to pay me. Her face turned red as I continued. Look, you have 2 options. Either sign the lease and start paying rent like a normal adult or move out. Simple. If you refuse, you'll receive a 14-day notice to vacate. And if you still don't leave, I'll have to file for eviction. Eviction? Amber hissed, as if the word itself were an insult. You'd actually do that to me? I would, I replied plainly. Because you did this to yourself. Amber jumped up from the couch, pacing as frustration and panic overtook her. I can't believe you're doing this, she muttered, shaking her head. I picked up my coffee and said, Believe it, Amber. I'm done letting you use me. She stormed toward the door, grabbed her bag and snapped, I'm going out. Take your time, I replied cheerfully. But just a heads up, if you don't pay by the end of the day, that 14-day notice will be delivered first thing tomorrow morning. That morning Amber didn't respond. She slammed the door behind her, and for the first time in 3 years I felt in control. True to her nature, Amber avoided me for the next few days. Usually, she'd be sprawled on the couch, blasting Netflix and leaving a mess behind, but now she barely spoke a word, and every encounter was curt and cold. Then 3 days later I heard the front door creak open almost at midnight. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be absorbed in my laptop, when I noticed a change in her posture as she stepped in. She wasn't just irritated, she was furious. Her hair was messy, her eyes burning with anger as she kicked off her heels and practically tossed them against the wall. After dropping her purse on the counter, she exhaled sharply. We need to talk, she said. I closed my laptop and leaned back. I'm listening. Amber folded her arms. You really filed the paperwork? She asked, her tone incredulous. I smirked. Good. Yes, I did. She let out a dry laugh. Jesus, Ally, you're seriously evicting me? I raised an eyebrow. No, Amber, I gave you options. You just didn't like them. Her frustration bubbled over. I was here for 3 years, and you never even talked to me before doing this. I tilted my head. Funny. I seem to remember you walking out mid-conversation. Her fists clenched. You don't get it. I was figuring things out, trying to keep living here for free. I repeated slowly. Exactly. And that's not fair. Her face flushed red as she tried to argue, but then she softened. Okay, I messed up. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was just venting. I didn't flinch. Yes, you did, Amber. You laughed and called me an idiot. I saw it, and so did Uncle Ray. Her eyes widened in shock. You told him I laughed? He told you. I nodded, watching her face fall as the reality hit her. Yes. And now you have 2 choices. Sign the lease and start paying rent, or move out. Amber's eyes darted, then she muttered. I can't believe you did this. I leaned forward. Why wouldn't I? You have a job. You earn well. You have the means to live on your own. She scoffed. So you're enjoying this? I met her gaze steadily. No, Amber. I'm done being used. I've given you every chance. Kindness, patience, even options, but you made your choice. After a long, heavy pause, Amber's eyes flickered toward the hallway. Her bedroom, the one space she'd always treated as hers even though it was never truly hers. With her jaw set, she finally said, Fine. I'll be out by the end of the week. I gave her a small, knowing smile. Good. And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't the fool, the pushover. I was in charge of my own home. 3 days later, Amber moved out. She didn't make a dramatic exit, no screaming, no last-minute protests. Just a packed suitcase, a closed bedroom door, and an hour later, a simple text message. I'm out. Good luck, Ally. I stared at that message for a long moment before locking my phone. I wasn't angry or even relieved, I just felt done. A week later, I walked through my house, and the silence wrapped around me like a long overdue hug. No more slammed doors, no more missing groceries, no more feeling like a guest in my own home. It was mine again, and I had earned that. There was a knock at the door, and when I opened it, Uncle Ray was standing there with a knowing smile. So how does it feel? He asked. I smiled. Peaceful. He chuckled. I bet you did. I can see you stepped aside and took control. Looks better already. I laughed. I think so too. He softened. I know it wasn't easy, kid, but you did the right thing. I sighed, leaning against the counter. Then why does it still feel weird? Ray folded his arms. Because she's your sister, Ally. I nodded slowly. She's my sister, but that doesn't mean she was good for you. And it sure doesn't mean you had to let her use you forever. I looked down for a moment, then met his gaze. Do you think she'll be okay? Ray exhaled slowly. She has to be. Amber's been forced to grow up, forced to take responsibility whether she likes it or not. She can't rely on you forever, and maybe that's the best thing that could happen to her. That night I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, staring out at the quiet street. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't realized I was missing: freedom. I had spent years letting someone else take up space in my life, in my home, in my peace. I had given, and given, only to be met with manipulation in return. And now I was free. I smiled as I took a sip of my wine. Amber had laughed about playing me for a fool and underestimated me, but now she was learning the hard way. I had finally stopped playing the fool.